So this is the Pixel 9a, and it has been out and available to purchase for over 2 months now, and I've been using it as my everyday device for over a month. And honestly, I'm not going to bury the lead here. I really, really like it. Now, is it perfect? No, but I do genuinely think that it's one of the more enticing mid-range options available right now. So let's dive in. Starting with the design, and for the most part, it does follow in the redesigned footsteps of its flagship brothers, the Pixel 9 and 9 Pro, in that we now have fully flattened out side rails, which I really like. But here's what's amazing. Not only do the side rails have a matte finish, but the rear panel does as well, meaning this is actually the first Pixel device to have both matte rails and a matte rear panel since, I believe, the Pixel 5. And no joke, it makes it the best in-the-hand feeling Pixel phone I think I've ever used. Now, to be clear, the back is actually made out of plastic as opposed to glass, but apart from the phone being lighter, you'd be hard pressed to notice the difference between the back of this phone and the back of the Pixel 9 Pro, for example, which does have a glass rear panel. Look, suffice it to say, Google absolutely nailed the implementation of the plastic on the 9a. Oh, and the phone is surprisingly durable too. I actually dropped it from a fair height on some tiles a couple of weeks back, and with any other phone, I'd have expected the back or front to be cracked after such a drop, but thanks to that use of plastic, the only damage was this slight ding on the bottom, which I was super impressed with. Now, the biggest controversial change Google made with the 9a in regards to design is that they removed that iconic camera bar visor on the back and instead gave us this very tame and plain looking camera unit. Now, from a visual standpoint, I much prefer the camera visor, but I will say I do very much appreciate that the camera unit on the 9a is essentially completely flush with the rear panel, meaning there is no side-to-side wobble when using the phone flat on a table. But in all honesty, the visor on the flagships also eliminates side-to-side wobble. So again, not the biggest fan of this particular redesign. Hopefully Google does away with it for next year's model. The other thing I'll just quickly comment on in regards to design are the bezels. And yes, they're much thicker than most of the competition, but this is actually the first A-series device from Google to have completely symmetrical bezels. And honestly, if you were to give me the choice between slightly thinner top and side bezels and a larger chin, or slightly thicker but symmetrical bezels all the way around like the Pixel 9a, I'm picking symmetry every single time. And then speaking of the display, honestly, for the price, you can't get much better than the one on the 9a. It's bright, punchy, and has a super fluid 120Hz refresh rate, and it actually matches the specs of the display on the much more premium Pixel 9, which is really impressive. The only complaint that I've got with it is this super odd bug where if you have adaptive brightness enabled, it actually significantly limits how bright the display can get unless it detects that you're in direct sunlight. Like, have a look at this. With adaptive brightness switched on, if I try to manually crank up the brightness slider, even though the brightness level says 100% here, check this out. If I switch adaptive brightness off, the brightness level jumps down by quite a significant margin, and if I now try to crank the brightness, it goes way brighter than before. So yeah, a weird bug that has caused many instances over the past month where the display hasn't been bright enough because of this issue, so hopefully it gets fixed in a not too distant software update. Now, while we're talking about software and bugs, I will say this phone has actually had a few more than I was expecting, including sometimes when I'm on a phone call, tapping the loudspeaker icon doesn't actually activate loudspeaker mode, meaning I'm left wondering why I can't hear the person on the other end of the line for a few seconds. And I'm also finding myself not receiving notifications from some apps, even with battery optimization switched off. I did also have this super random bug when I first set up the phone where my quick settings panel was completely blank even after rebooting several times, but thankfully switching the color contrast setting here to medium and then back to default fixed it. Just thought I'd mention that in case anyone else experiences that issue. Aside from that though, even with the update to Android 16 a few days ago, it has been a very similar experience to what we've seen on Pixel phones over the past couple of years. So a very clean and minimal UI, an incredibly limiting home launcher, but the best third-party launcher experience that you can get on an Android phone, which is kind of an odd combination, and then all of those really handy Pixel exclusive features thrown in that we've all come to know and love. Is it perfect? No, and in fact, I've actually been itching to get back to using One UI since my time with the S25 Ultra earlier this year, for what that's worth, but I've still really enjoyed the software on the Pixel 9a nonetheless. Oh, and by the way, for anyone wondering why this version of Android 16 isn't that big Material 3 expressive redesign that we've seen in the QPR1 beta update, That's because it's actually not due to ship until later this year. Real quick, just wanted to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. Now, if you ever connect to public Wi-Fi, like at a cafe or hotel, your data is basically up for grabs. Hackers, ISPs, even the websites that you visit, they can all track what you're doing. But with CyberGhost, you just turn it on and boom, your internet traffic is encrypted, your IP is hidden, and you can browse privately without anyone snooping. And beyond privacy, CyberGhost also unlocks geo-blocked content on streaming services. Take Inception, one of my all-time favorite movies. It's not on Netflix Australia, but it is on the US version. With CyberGhost, I can switch my location and watch it instantly, and this works for pretty much all streaming services too, by the way. They've got servers in over 100 countries. They have over 38 million users worldwide with an excellent Trustpilot rating from 20,000 plus reviews. It also works on smart TVs and consoles. Plus, you can protect up to 7 devices using the one account. And then on top of all of that, right now you can get 84% off plus 4 extra months free using my link below. And they also have a 45-day money back guarantee. So there's almost no reason not to give it a go. All right, from there we have the haptics, and whilst they're not quite as good as the Pixel 9 or Pixel 9 Pro, they are still very, very similar and leagues better than other similarly priced phones like the Nothing 3A Pro, for example. One quirk I have with them though is that even with this touch feedback setting dialed all the way down, they're still tuned a little too strong for my liking and could do with some extra tweaking in regards to their subtlety. And what's really strange is that the Google Keyboard app no longer offers any setting to dial back the haptics either. You can either turn them on or off, and that's it. This touch feedback slider also doesn't affect keyboard haptics, so I have no clue why that setting was removed. Then possibly the biggest downgrade that I noticed compared to the Pixel 9 and 9 Pro is the fingerprint sensor. Unlike those phones, both of which have ultrasonic sensors, the 9A goes back to the outdated optical sensor technology, and you absolutely do notice the difference. Thankfully, Face Unlock is still in full swing on the 9A, which helps out in bright conditions, but when you're in lower light conditions, that's when you'll truly notice the subpar fingerprint sensor on this phone. When it comes to battery, despite this phone having a decently larger battery capacity compared to its flagship brothers, I haven't necessarily experienced any improvements in my day-to-day use. Most days it does survive with juice left over by the time I'm heading into bed, but there have been a few days where I've needed to top it up before then. So I'd say it's solid without being amazing. And whilst it doesn't have anything resembling fast charging, it does at least have wireless charging, which to me is a feature that I love having on any phone that I'm using as my everyday device. So being able to use this feature again after not having it for a month when I used the Nothing 3A Pro, that was hugely appreciated. And so finally, we have the cameras, and there's actually kind of three ways to view the cameras on this phone. The first way is that they seem pretty much identical to the cameras on the regular Pixel 9. And for the most part, they are very similar, and unless you're a photography enthusiast, you'll notice hardly any difference in real-world performance. The second way that you could view the cameras is that they're worse than the Pixel 9, and that is also true. I mean, not only is the main sensor smaller, meaning it's not quite as good in low light, but the ultra-wide is an even bigger downgrade with both a smaller sensor and a significantly smaller megapixel count, therefore no 4K 60. And yes, I have noticed the drop in quality when taking shots with it on the 9A. Oh, and by the way, the ultra-wide lens on the 9A also doesn't support autofocus, but thankfully that doesn't mean we lose out on macro functionality. It's just that we now achieve macro shots through the main lens instead. Now, admittedly, it doesn't get quite as close as the ultra-wide's macro functionality on the Pixel 9 and 9 Pro, but on the flip side, you do get less distortion and you end up blocking less light because you don't need to be as close. So as I said, you could read that one of two ways, that the cameras are pretty much the same as the regular 9 or that they're worse, both of which are kind of true. But then the most interesting way to look at the cameras, in my opinion, is if you stack them up against the competition, namely the iPhone 16e and the Nothing 3A Pro. You see, on the Nothing 3A Pro, you get a fantastic camera configuration, including a 50 megapixel 3x periscope lens, which is amazing, but the actual shooting experience is really unreliable. On the other hand, with the iPhone 16e, you get a fantastic and incredibly reliable camera shooting experience, but only one camera, meaning the versatility is really lacking. Then you have the Pixel 9a, which seems to slot perfectly in the middle, much like its price, with slightly more versatility than the 16e thanks to its ultra-wide lens, but a much more reliable shooting experience when compared to the Nothing 3a Pro. In fact, not once have I experienced issues shooting with the cameras on the Pixel 9a throughout the entire month plus that I've been using it. I will just note, if you're a big portrait mode user, then the Pixel 9a does actually still suffer from incredibly poor performance when using this mode, where sometimes you'll be blocked from capturing a portrait mode image for like 20 to 30 seconds if you've already taken a few back to back until they all finish processing. And this is honestly baffling to me, but if I'm being honest, I rarely use portrait mode these days, and thankfully that same issue doesn't carry over to any of the other modes, so it hasn't been a huge issue for me. But yeah, after using the iPhone 16e and the Nothing 3a Pro last month, I've got to say I've been really pleasantly surprised at just how nice it has been to use the cameras on the Pixel 9a. And so, on its own, without question, the Pixel 9a is a fantastic device that ticks a heck of a lot of boxes. The only slight issue is that with the regular Pixel 9 now being discounted down to $599 US, I could see that being a pretty viable option instead. However, whether you're actually getting $100 extra worth in value, I'm not really too sure. Yes, you get smaller bezels, a slightly improved camera system, slightly better haptics, a better fingerprint sensor, faster charging, and technically a more premium design, but as far as I'm concerned, none of those are game-changing improvements, and for someone who's in the market for a phone of around this price, I doubt any of that will be noticed at all, save for perhaps the better fingerprint sensor. A better option might be to get the Pixel 9a with the higher storage capacity and then just call it a day. It's also the newer phone, so in theory, it's meant to get more software support, so there's that as well. But let me know what you think of the Pixel 9a down in the comments below, and I'm going to be putting together a detailed video comparing this phone to the iPhone 16e and the Nothing 3a Pro in the coming weeks, so hit subscribe so you don't miss that when it goes live. Aside from that, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll catch you later.